Hello, everyone. First things first, let's just get this out the way. How rad is my shirt? I'm sorry. Rad. It's Rowdy Roddy Piper. He is missed. Great wrestler. Anyway, so we started thinking about oppression, right? We're writing about oppression, which in and of itself is a pretty challenging thing to do. But one of the things I want to talk to you guys about this morning is a very quick writing concept that I think is extremely important. And this might be a shorter video because the concept's pretty open, but at the same time, this is probably the number one thing that I see that students struggle with in English 1010. I want to try to go ahead and see if we can get out in front of it. Most of the time, people really complain about punctuation issues and stuff like that. I've actually found that the single most problematic thing for English 1010 has to do with paragraphing. Paragraphing, and the issue is, I have a lot of students who bring me, I think I've probably said a little bit about this before, but I think it bears making almost a whole video about. I've seen students bring in a 3 to 4 page paper, and it has no paragraph indentions in it. That is really problematic for a lot of reasons. So imagine 3 or 4 pages without any line breaks. It's just a single chunk block of text. Now, again, like I said, I think I'm retreading a little bit of old ground here, but again, it really is that important. Think about this from the perspective of a reader who is reading this massive chunk of text. That actually asks us to follow a single train of thought for a long, long time. Now, when you think about a conversation, conversations have a lot of natural kind of breaks in them where we switch and we move from one topic to the next. So your brain has a chance to kind of sort of focus and refocus as we approach new things and as we make jumps and transitions. A lot of times we kind of sort of avoid talking about writing in terms of how we talk, but there are some situations where the flow and the pacing of a conversation can actually give us a lot of insight into how writing should behave. And we have to actually kind of be careful when we go in and we completely change how someone writes to try to get it away from how they talk. How you talk is a part of your identity, right? It's part of who you are. There's a concept in writing called code switching, where we kind of evaluate the situation that we're in and we change our language to sort of like approach different things with different types of phrases and different, voices. So if you're in a job interview, it's typically a pretty bad idea to rely a lot on slang, right? You kind of want to universalize your language a little bit. But at the same time, it's like we don't want to completely erase someone's linguistic or dialect identity. In a lot of ways, sometimes that can be very strong depending on what it is you're doing. So a lot of times English teachers come in with this idea that they're just going to completely change someone's voice when they come into the writing. And students have already said to me this semester, Mr. Bailey, I write how I talk. And I'm like, yeah, we'll work on that. But I don't want people to think that they absolutely have to change the way they speak. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a case-by-case basis type thing. I really discourage thinking about it in terms like that because we don't necessarily have to completely shut out who we are from our writing. We just have to kind of learn how to judge it and understand what's required of us in a linguistic moment. In any case, yeah, I can't talk for too long without going down some type of strange rabbit hole, but hey, it's me. Anyway, so the point here is when we're writing, we want to avoid having a kind of word vomit on the page, at least in what it is that we're presenting. There's a big difference between the writing that we do to start a concept and the writing that we do to finish a concept. And this is something that a lot of students have never really gotten the chance to experiment with. And it's a little challenging to do this in the online sphere, but I'm going to try it. So essentially, you have to start in a way that is going to accept the badness of your writing, right? So if you're not sharing something with me, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can do a singular blot and you can do those single paragraphs that go pages and pages and pages if that's what it takes to get the writing on the page first. But you don't want to submit that later in the assignment, right? So if it's like a draft, that's a very drafty thing to do. But as we move further and further into the process, you need to start thinking about how you're dividing your thoughts, how you're moving from one concept to the next so that your reader is getting those kind of paces and those breaks. So as we move further into the process, one of the things I encourage my students to do is to start thinking about the concept of your writing and start subdividing it into different areas, right? To think about your writing in steps. First, I will start here. I will accomplish this thing. And then I will start here. I will accomplish this thing. So that your writing is moving from concept to concept as you kind of like, make this wider map through your ideas and your experiences. Now, for people who don't write regularly, this can be really difficult. You're not used to like structuring your thoughts and layering them like that. And so one of the things that I've found is I have to kind of model this for you a little bit, which who would have thought? I'm a teacher. That's what I'm supposed to do, right? I'm supposed to model things for you and kind of help you work through these steps in ways that will break it down and make it a little bit more bite-sized so that then you can kind of act on it later. So I'm sitting around, and please understand, you guys, oftentimes I sit around in my office for like 30 to 45 minutes thinking about what it is I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, how do I break this down? How do I model this? And so, again, I'm going to retread old ground here a little bit because I've talked to you guys a little bit about my personal impressions, right? But really the only way I can explore this is to kind of dive into my own experience. I could talk about things from a fictional perspective. I could talk about things from a historical perspective. But, I know myself better than anyone else. So when I'm thinking about the things that oppress me, when I think about the struggles in my life and the things that are constantly sort of staring me in the face and demanding stuff of me, if I want to write about that, I can't just launch into a rant, right? And this is a little different from just kind of like ranting about it in front of the camera. And the funny thing is the more you write, you'll find that your thoughts and your spoken words actually can kind of sort of develop as well. Writing is good for your brain. If you write regularly, you'll find yourself being able to like go through these long kind of conversations with a little bit more structure to them. And people ask me all the time when I do these videos and when I'm teaching, they're like, how do you just sort of extemporaneously, and that means just kind of off the cuff, how do you do these lectures and how do you just sort of like run with it without reading off of a piece of paper or, going through note cards or anything like that? And I'm like, well, I have this outline in my head and I have the steps I want to get to, right? I have basically the way that I typically do a lecture. I know, rabbit hole, but follow me for a minute. The way I do a lecture is I've got like 3 or 4 things I want to say, right? I got 3 markers that I want to hit. And because I have the kind of brain that has practiced this concept, I can typically work my way through points organically. I don't have to hyperstructure it. Hyperstructuring things actually has a tendency to sort of choke my lectures off a bit. It makes me a little bit more rigid. I like to kind of move freely between concepts, but that's actually not the case when I write. I have a much more firm idea of where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. But in any case, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, if I was to write about my mental health and I wanted to talk about my mental health in a paper like this, the first thing I would do, and you'll find this works most of the time. I don't know what it is about the number 3. 3 is natural. I can do 3 units or break down 3 points about virtually anything, even if I don't know anything about it. I can come up with 3 things to say. So I began by outlining my oppression, right? And my oppression, the one that I'm going to focus on today, is my mental health. I struggle with all those different, diseases. I don't like that. That sounds awful. I have mental health struggles, right? I have maybe disorders, the depression, the anxiety, blah, 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 yeah. So I spend a lot of time talking about what the experience of those is like, right? What it's like to go through a day of depression. I had a really bad weekend. this sometimes, a weekend, a couple of days can actually be extremely rough depending on what my brain wants to do. So yesterday I was kind of a wreck. I mean, it just kind of sort of comes and goes. So I can talk about first the experience of my oppression, right? So from there, what would number 2 be? You guys have already done number 1 as well. You've outlined a little bit of your oppression. We haven't done much detail in it yet, but that's okay because we're modeling a kind of advanced pre-writing thing. The second thing for me right now, and I'll come up with the third one maybe on Wednesday. The second thing for me would be the benefit. So I've outlined it. We could do this. The experience of the oppression, the problems presented by the oppression, and then the benefit of it. How is oppression beneficial? Sometimes you got to work a little hard for this concept. For me, my depression has made me very empathetic. It's really hard for me to get mad at someone when they seem to be struggling with something, because I immediately I understand what you're going through. When somebody is struggling with deadlines, when someone is very obviously having trouble personally, it's difficult for me to get angry at them because I understand what that's like, right? So I've developed a sense of empathy. You'll notice I'm subdividing even further now. What is the benefit? 1, empathy. 2, I actually think when I finally started becoming honest about my mental health, that was when I actually started a lot of personal growth, because for a long time, I didn't really admit to it. I wouldn't face it. I just thought I was having a 3-year-long stint of bad days. And if things would just get better, if people would stop acting like a bunch of buttholes, then I would be better, right? But eventually I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, no, that's not the case. There's something, it's you, right? And that's a weird thing to say. That's a hard thing to say, but I was like, it's you. There's something wrong in your head. And I started getting help. I actually think I'm doing a lot better now than I ever have in my entire life. Now that I'm open with it and I get therapy for it. So the benefit of empathy, the fact that I've opened the door to growth within my life, right? These oppressions, these oppressive things that I struggle with have brought me benefits, right? And the other, I'm thinking, again, I'm going with 3. So another potential positive benefit of my oppression might also be my creative output. I don't know what it is about depression, but depression makes me creative, right? When I'm stuck and I'm completely down, all I can do is just sit there and just kind of think. I get trapped in my own head a little bit. And that's where some of my greatest creative, my best creative periods come after an experience, after a prolonged depressive period. It's really weird. There's a weird relationship there. So look at what I just did. Not only have I defined my oppression and talked about the experience of it, but I've also dug out some potential benefits. Each one of those benefits is something that I could potentially write a paragraph about, whether it's my empathy, my growth, my creativity. How long a paper is this? Now, again, this is not easy for someone who doesn't have a brain that's wired like mine. But the reason my brain is wired like this is because I write. It's because I think in these terms. Writing actually improves my brain activity. But this subdividing that comes so easy to me is something we have to work at a little bit. This is the reason why a lot of the times when I'm grading a paper, one of the only big things that just completely is I got to give this a bad grade is if it does not have the paragraphs. I'm very likely to take lots of points away from you if you do not have those paragraphs in there, because that tells me you're not at the point in the writing process that I want you to be when I'm asking you to turn something in formally. Does that make sense? So to model this today, I want you guys to go back to the oppression, and I want you to tell me the benefits that you get from it. This can be hard. Sometimes you got to be full of crap. Sometimes you just have to sort of make it up. In writing, we can do that. In writing, we don't necessarily have to be held to the truth all the time. It's expressive. You can also think of it as what are the potential benefits that you could get from it. It doesn't necessarily have to be benefit that you're getting now. So in any case, that's what I want you to do for today, is to go return to the stuff that oppresses you. And I want you to write me, let's say 5 sentences still. We're starting out slow. Give me 5 sentences about how your oppression gives you some type of benefit. Okay? Why am I playing with a charger? Right? Write me some sentences about the potential benefit. And what we'll have, once we expand on these concepts, we should actually have a pretty good chunk of writing once we go back and we put these things together, which we will do later. But like I said, for right now, tell me about the potential benefits of what oppresses you. Let's see what you come up with. Thanks, guys. We'll do something a little bit more straight up writing execution oriented next time. It's going to be, well, it'll be fun, but you'll see. Wednesday is going to be interesting. I hope you guys have a great week. And I want a cookie. I just really want cookies. I just want to hog out on a bag of Oreo cookies. Anyway, thank you guys. Have a good week. Man, I rock. Oh, I didn't end it yet.